Zelda 2? Wasn't the first game called The Legend of Zelda? Is this like a First Blood Rambo thing where it started with one title, but all anyone could remember was the character's name, so they defaulted to calling the sequels that? Also, why is this The Adventure of Link? Wasn't the first one an Adventure of Link as well? A really small one right out of the gate, but why are there black bars on the sides of the screen when you're on the overworld? I understand overscan, but this is the only place it happens.
If all else fails, use fire.
Okay, arsonist. Yeah, I don't think I'll be following that advice, thank you.
Please, let me help you. Come inside. I can restore your life.
How you be doing that? What would we be doing in there?
I am much too busy to talk to a stranger.
And yet here you are.
Get candle in Parappa Palace. Go west.
Yeah, here we go again with the less than useful hints. So, the problem with what this kid is saying is twofold. Initially, you might think that he's saying that the Parappa Palace is found in the west part of the overworld, which it's not. It's more northeast. What he likely means is that the candle is to the west once you're in the dungeon, which it kind of is, but going to the west right after entering the dungeon will lead you to a key, which you need to open a gate that's to the east, then go further east to go up an elevator to get a second key, then head back, go down a second elevator, then go west to find the candle. Like, sure, it is to the west, but if Rauru is the first place I'm visiting, why would I ever think he means where the candle is in the palace and not where the palace is? Also, how does this child know that? Did he put the candle there? Did he visit the palace and noped out of there the second the monsters showed up? So, in order to get to Parappa Palace, which has the candle, which is the item we need to light up the caves, we need to first go through a dark cave, which is fine. This is a good way to teach us what the candle does. The problem is that there's a louder in here that is completely obscured, which you would only know by watching its sprite overlap with some of the floor tiles, but not only would you not know he's there when you play this for the first time, why would you think to observe the floor? I can barely see this on an OLED display. I can't imagine you'd see it clearly on a CRT from the 80s. Sure, it doesn't do much damage and is meant to teach you that enemies lurk in the caves, so you need to light them up somehow, but it feels like a cheap shot when you're on your way to get the item you need for this. Much like the first game, this game has knockback damage. Where it was only mildly inconvenient in the first game, being a top-down dungeon crawler, it's way more annoying in this one, being a side-scrolling action platformer. With platforming games usually come bottomless pits, and if you get knocked into one, even at full health, you lose a life. Pretty standard stuff, right? And in fact, to this game's credit, if you lose all your lives and get a game over, you don't lose all your progress. You have to start back at the North Castle where the game starts, but all the levels you've raised, palaces you've completed, spells you've acquired, and items you've collected stay saved. You just have to trek back to where you were before, which can be pretty rough and annoying for sure, but not the end of the world. In fact, the first Zelda was like this too. Where this does become an absolute controller-throwing, TV-breaking, I never want to play Zelda again pain in the ass is later on in the game. See, unlike the first Zelda, you have a leveling system in this one, and as is standard, the more levels you raise, the more experience points you need for your next level up. This game does do something unique in that each stat, attack, magic, and life, have their own level up point requirements, so even if you raise enough points to increase your attack stat, you only need more points to raise that attack stat again, whereas your life and magic stats still need the same experience points they needed before, and it's up to you to determine how you want to level up. The thing is, the point requirements later in the game are pretty damn silly, and unless you use a technique we'll talk about later, it will take you forever to level up. As an example, to get attack level 5, you need 2,000 points, and to get to level 6, you need an additional 3,000 points. Every time you level up a stat, the experience counter goes back down to 0, and you can choose to ignore leveling up a stat so you can continue earning experience for another one. We'll talk about this in just a bit too, but the combat in this game can be super finicky, particularly against the enemies that give you the most experience, which, not counting the Guardians, usually caps at around 200 points per enemy, but that's unusual. More common enemies give you way less experience. So imagine you're on your way to leveling your attack to level 6. You've accrued 2,950 experience points. You just need 50 more. That's just a couple of enemies. Or even just one if you come across a stronger one. You're at full health. You've got this in the bag. And then you get hit mid-jump and fall into a bottomless pit on your last life and get a game over. You have just lost all those experience points. Every enemy you fought to get to where you were experience-wise doesn't matter anymore, and when you're placed back at the beginning of the game, that's just insult to injury. As if that weren't bad enough, there are certain enemies in this game that, in addition to hurting you upon contact, actually take experience points away from you as well. Fortunately, most of them go down pretty easily, but the problem is that some of them take away more experience than you earn from defeating them, and some don't give any experience at all.
The Iron Knuckles.
For the record, it's not just them, but they're the first example of why the combat isn't the greatest in this game, and that's putting it mildly. I'm sure that the reason that they have you fight this first one in a corridor where the ceiling is so low is so that once you see that trying to strike it directly doesn't work, and trying to hit it while crouching doesn't work, the only other option is to try to hit it while jumping, to give you an idea of how high you need to jump to hit him. But the problem is, it's not always the most consistent strategy. The ceiling is still tall enough that if you strike too high, you'll miss and likely get hit once you land. So the idea is to strike on your way down, right? And yeah, but given that you're bonking against the ceiling, you need to time that quickly, otherwise you'll strike just below the head, hitting his shield hitbox, meaning you won't hurt him and likely get hit anyway. The problem isn't necessarily the patience you need to fight some of these enemies, or the fact that some of them have random attack patterns that you need to be super observant in order to avoid, or that they have specific hitboxes that aren't the easiest to hit, or even that if you fail to land a hit on them, you might get punished for it. Those are all reasonable things to expect out of an action game. It's that because your sword is a pretty short-range weapon, and a lot of these enemies don't stop moving when fighting you, you have to be on the move as well, meaning that trying to hit a very specific hitbox involves approaching them and jumping at them, leaving you vulnerable to an attack no matter the outcome. And that sounds reasonable until you realize that all this is happening with little to no way of strategizing around their attack patterns, either because they're constantly changing it up, or because the window of opportunity to strike is so small. You literally just have to go for it or back off, because waiting around often won't help at all. And the thing is, I get that all that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's mostly because it's best understood when playing it. I can't stress enough how awkward it is trying to get a hit on some of these enemies sometimes, and the thing is, it's not like it's a control issue. The game feels pretty good and the controls are responsive. I'm even willing to admit that it might be a skill issue, but that becomes harder to do when I swear I would attack some of these enemies the exact same way I would when I successfully landed a hit, got my attack blocked, and then got punished for it. I don't mind admitting that I suck at something when I can see what it is I did wrong, but when I feel like I'm doing the thing the game expects me to do and only land a hit sometimes when every move I make is a risk that will result in me getting hit, I can't say that I find that to be too fun. You better get used to this beeping sound effect because you're gonna hear it all the time when you're in a palace. Discount Hammer Brother. You put a point bag on a crumbling bridge over a bottomless pit? That's just friggin' mean. And you know what's so ironic about everything I just said about the combat? None of it applies to the first Guardian, Horsehead, who is miles easier to fight in my opinion. But that's mostly due to the fact that it's incredibly easy to lock him into a pattern where he can't hit you. During boss fights, the screen gets locked onto the main arena, and if you knock Horsehead off screen, his AI can't enter an attack animation until his sprite is fully visible again. But if you time your jump slashes well enough, you can hit him as he's coming back on screen and knock him back off again, meaning he'll never even get the chance to attack you. For the sake of my experience points, I'm glad you can cheese him, but did the devs not realize you could do this? On the overworld, you'll enter battle sequences if the monsters that appear happen to overlap with you, which can be annoying when you're just trying to get to the next area. The only times you won't fight any enemies is if you stay on a main path, which is cool, but why? What makes the main path any safer than being on the grass?
I am Error.
That's okay, buddy. I was a mistake too.
Use keys in palaces they are found in.
Well, yeah. Also, I know what she's saying, but I don't think this is true. I'm pretty sure you can use a key you get from one palace to open locks in other palaces. The Gorias are another example of what I'm talking about. By all accounts, these guys should be easier to hit since they don't have shields like the Iron Knuckles do, but they throw boomerangs up and down that keep you at a distance, all while moving. So you have to dodge by jumping or crouching, but continue to try and make your way to him, keeping in mind the next boomerang he throws and the one that's coming back, which, depending on the Goria's position, might overlap on top of each other, meaning your only course of action is to turn around and crouch to deflect the bottom one with your shield, and then try to book it toward the Goria, by which point it will likely have already tossed another boomerang, and one of these is bound to hit you, meaning you'll either be knocked further away from the Goria, forcing you to deal with more boomerangs, or closer to it, meaning you're way more likely to get hit again. And something I noticed during my second playthrough of this game is that it took me way less hits to defeat this Goria in particular, and it's because during my first playthrough, I was trying to level everything up together. Whenever I had enough experience points, I leveled up one of my stats. This time around though, I saved up my points to level up my attack early on, and noticed that I was having an easier time. Originally, I felt like the game's difficulty was way ramped up after the first palace, but this time around, that transition felt way smoother, leading me to think that saving up your points to level up your attack early on isn't just something you can or should do, but it might be what the game expects you to have done, which, fair enough, but now I just feel like I played the game wrong the first time. Sure, you don't have to do it, you can still beat the Goria, but the game is going to be that much harder if you don't prioritize that one stat. I guess it just doesn't feel like natural progression because something I already thought was difficult is just made worse by the fact that I didn't make the right choice, which I didn't think would have too great of an impact. And I mean, look at the experience points I'm getting. 3s, 20s, I need 1,000 points to level up my attack again, but with the points I'm getting here, I would think that leveling everything up at the same time would be the sensible thing to do. Earlier we got the jump spell, which lets us jump higher than we normally do. It's hard for me to call it useful when it's relegated to pretty specific obstacles like one wall that's a little too tall every so often. In a way, I'm glad because magic is already a pretty scarce resource in this game, and some spells cost a lot of magic to use, so they probably didn't want to bother you too much with forcing you to use magic that could be useful elsewhere, but it does make me wonder what the point is when most of the spells in this game are so situational that you could use an amputee's fingers to count the amount of times you'll use them. By the way, the amputee in my example lost their leg in a life-saving operation, meaning they still have all 10 of their fingers. So why did I use an amputee as an example? Well, why can't I? What's the matter with you? So this is Bagu's house, and it's not visible on the overworld. The only way you'd know roughly how to find this is by talking to a purple bot in the water town of Saria, who tells you that Master is in woods and, I'm assuming north, of river, but that doesn't really tell us anything. And by the way, you only get this information after talking to the bot multiple times in a row, after dialogue that suggests it's sleeping. I don't know how we would know to do that, or even trust to approach this thing when other bots have been enemies in the past. And if you say that it's because this one's a different color, I don't know, man, that's pretty racist. But then that means you just have to walk about the forest until you happen to find this place. And it's not like it's optional either. In order to progress, you need to cross the bridge to the other side of town, which is guarded by the riverman who tells you that only townfolk may cross this river. So naturally, you would think to ask someone in the water town of Saria to help, right? Well, when no one else seems to help and your only other option is to wander about in the woods end of river, I'm sure you're surprised to find out that this guy in a house that is not in the town is the townfolk we needed to talk to get permission to cross the bridge. Some towns have side quests you need to complete before you're allowed to meet the old man that teaches you a new spell. The first quest involved retrieving a trophy stolen by a Goria found in a cave in the Tantari Desert. This one is interesting because the girl says she lost her mirror, but it gives you no further information than that. As it so happens, the mirror is found under a table in the very first house on the very next screen, but how in the shit are you supposed to know that? It literally looks no different than any other table in this game. I can only imagine that it's because the building is uncommon looking and no one is in here, but this thing could have been anywhere.
I found a mirror under the table.
This is the only time Link talks across these past two games. What is that ache hanging off of? Oh, these motherfuckers. The Dairas are the epitome of enemies that are constantly attacking, never allowing for a good opportunity to strike back. I got lucky with this first one. I could take total credit and claim that I'm just so good at this game, but no, man. These things constantly charge at you, swinging their axe, one of the weapons your shield can't defend against, and you have to attack at your earliest convenience without getting hit. I think I started to alternate between jump slashes and crouch stabs, which seemed to work, but make no mistake, these things are annoying to fight. Oh. Okay, that Bago is just stuck on the wall. And the red Dairas are worse because they throw their axes at you at rates that are constantly changing, making the whole alternating between jumping and crouching thing way more inconvenient. Jumping is just asking to get hit, and I can't move if I'm crouching. And look at this dude. They put a Daira right there next to a bit that prevents you from just jumping over it, and what they expect you to do is get a running start and use the momentum to crouch slide and stab the Daira, knocking it back a bit, and then backing off yourself. Like, what, dude? And then I still get hit even when I do the thing right! That's literally not fair! Of all the spell descriptions, this one is the most vague. Like, what do you think will happen when you read "this magic word will give you power"? If the shield spell increases my defense for that screen, does this new spell give me an attack boost? Well, it's called the fairy spell, and in both this and the last game, touching a fairy restored my health. Is that what you mean? I doubt it, because I already have the life spell that does that. I feel like there had to have been a better way to describe this spell, right? Returning from the first game are the bubbles, but rather than preventing you from using your sword for a bit, they instead deplete your magic. Initially, you might think that they're invincible like they were in the first game, and that's only because they take an ungodly number of hits to defeat, which is made way easier when you have the downward thrust, locking them in place when you jump on them, constantly dealing damage. The thing is, you can still defeat them without it, and they give out a hefty amount of experience earlier on in the game. The problem with that is that it takes so much longer because not having the downward thrust means you manually have to keep the bubble in place, and since you're not as strong, you don't deal as much damage, and manually inputting a sword swing is a lot slower than just holding down and downward thrusting. But by the time you can, the experience you get doesn't make a huge difference anymore. It's still worth it, but almost disappointingly so. With how long they take to defeat, even with the downward thrust, you almost wish they gave out more experience. Oh! I literally turned into a fairy. That's pretty cool. I have a smaller hitbox and I can fly around the screen avoiding most enemies and reaching higher places if I need to. Oh, and I can just bypass locked doors? That's awesome, but is that something a fairy does? Maybe it's because the locked doors are actually gates I can pass through? I don't know, I guess I just wouldn't assume that this is a thing I can do as a fairy. Also, and just because we're on the subject of the fairy spell and it won't come up for a while in context, the thing I least like about it is that once you use it, the only way you can revert back to Link is by leaving the screen. It's not the most inconvenient thing long term, but there are a couple of instances where I wish I could just use the select button again to turn back. Having the life system, it only makes sense for there to be a way to get lives back, right? Well, you can, in the form of finding Link dolls in certain locations. There are only 6 you can collect, but once you collect them, they're gone for the rest of the game. And while I think it's cool to have these, especially in a pinch where the next time you lose a life you get a game over, the fact that you can only increase the amount of lives you have by 6, not counting getting 9,000 experience points once all your stats are leveled up, but who's gonna bother by then, kinda makes the dolls feel pointless, you know? Rather, I wish there were another way to get extra lives that didn't involve getting an insane number of experience points. Regular platformers do this too, of course, where you get an extra life and can't collect it again, but I think the huge difference is in how it's handled. It's a lot easier to collect 100 coins in Super Mario Bros. Than it is to get 9,000 experience points in Zelda 2.
The blue iron knuckle.
Here you see me turn into a fairy because it's honestly just the easier thing to do. He constantly moves, has a shield, and throws multiple of his swords, meaning you not only have to block his swords with your shield, but time that to his movements and inch your way forward until you can land a hit on the guy.
With Hoots, I could walk on the water.
Okay, Jesus. Next you'll tell me that you can turn all that water you're walking on into wine. Newsflash, that's not water you're stepping on, it's grapes! This is quite possibly the stupidest side quest though. The girl that lets you into the old man's house tells you she's thirsty, and all you have to do is walk a little to the left, interact with the fountain right next to her house, and get her some water. It's easy, but it's easy. Why did I need to do this? Why couldn't she have done it? I feel like the fire spell should be more useful than it is. Aside from the shield spell, and I guess technically the life spell, fire is the only one you're not ever required to use. But unlike shield and life, I never feel like I should use the fire spell. Both of those give me more of a chance in any given fight, but all the fire spell does is allow you to defeat the otherwise invulnerable Zoras and Tektites, which you can just avoid fighting. They only give out 50 experience points, which isn't nothing, but it's not a whole lot at this point in the game, especially when I can defeat other enemies that give me more without having to spend any magic. And yeah, it does serve as a ranged attack, but again, it's not like I can just bust it out whenever I want because I need to spend magic to do so, and I'd rather save it for something more important.
Jump in a hole in the palace if you go.
Did this kid just tell me to go die?
The river devil eats those who are weak.
This one is just needlessly spreading fear. Reading this, you might think you need to max out your stats or something before fighting the creature that blocks the river to the south of here, but you never even fight the river devil. It's a cool bit of world building, I guess, but everyone else here gives me genuine advice. Why would I think this is any different? Behold, a child I found in this random cave!
Stop by for a while. Revived.
Well, I wasn't dead. And yeah, I see you typing in the comments. I know that the word revive can also be used to mean reinvigorate. It's called a joke.
The devil does not like noise.
Ah, let me guess. He's weak to the arrows in this one too? I'm not supposed to be able to do this. So with the boots you obtain from the Maze Island Palace, you can walk on water. Sorry, sir, I guess you're not insane, but you never specified which boots. Anyway, while we need these to access the next palace, we can't exactly walk on all of the water tiles. And why? Why is some water walkable, but other water not walkable? Is magic blocking the way? If so, why does magic only block some of the way? The Mongols are one of 3 regular enemies that can give you 200 experience points upon their defeat, which is the most a regular enemy can give you, so they're likely not easy to beat, right? Yeah, and the reason for it is because they shoot fireballs at you that, while easy to jump over and avoid, give the Mongols time to disappear and reappear elsewhere, by which time you'll have already tried jumping into them to try to hit them, miss, and accidentally land on another of their fireballs, if not onto another reappearing Mongo. Oh, great! I just have to walk through walls again! So, someone in the mountain town of Darunia actually does tell you that this palace has a false wall. There's just a couple of problems with that. A, how am I supposed to know that this is the false wall when it looks no different than other walls I've come across? And B, how am I expected to remember that hit and notice the fact that the camera keeps moving as I approach the wall when I have to deal with all the enemies in the palace up to this point? You think I'm gonna remember what I had for breakfast when fighting some of these enemies, let alone what a random NPC told me 20 minutes ago? I just fought a blue iron knuckle, man. The only thing I'm thinking about right now is how lucky I am to not have died. So, while I don't have to fight the actual monster, the River Devil's Passage is still a pain in the ass to get through. Not as bad as a lot of other parts in this game, certainly not worse than a palace, but it is relentless with all the Geru throwing rocks at you on top of the ones directly in your path, and your best course of action is to just go, stop right before you get hit with a rock, and then immediately go again. Well, damn, don't approach this town sign, got it. No, but seriously, if I had been on my last life when that happened, I'd be so pissed. Usually the towns you visit are safe havens, where you have the opportunity to replenish your life and magic, and while it's a good twist that Kasuto is the opposite of that, I just came from 3 screens filled with monsters throwing rocks at me, possibly some encounters in the graveyard in the forest, and crossed 2 bridges with fire-breathing skeleton fish that could knock me into bottomless pits to get here! And you decide this is the best place to set a trap I couldn't possibly see coming? Because the enemies here are literally invisible, meaning I have no way of knowing when I'm about to get hit? Since Kasuto is plagued by invisible Moa, you now have to find the hidden town of Kasuto after traversing a cave to the north. Once you come out the other side, though, there doesn't appear to be anything other than a beach and a forest. The thing is, you have to use the hammer to find the town amongst the trees. I get that it's the hidden town of Kasuto, but how was I supposed to know to do this? Like, yes, the old man in Kasuto tells me that I need to go look east in woods, but other times, such as with Bagu's house, I just have to walk over the right tile. No one tells you that you have to perform an additional action to find it. What's worse is that while, yes, this is a forest to the east, there was another forest east of Kasuto before the cave, much larger than this one. Am I meant to just walk around there not knowing to use my hammer, find nothing, go through the cave, and still not know to use my hammer? The only reason I have such a gripe with this is that not only is this the one time you need to cut down a tree, if I don't have the manual, how would I know I can use the hammer to chop down trees? Rocks make sense, but you would think I'd get another item to chop down trees or just use my sword. But why would they implement a separate item? This is the only tree that gets you anything for chopping it down! The 4th and final magic container you can collect in this game is only accessible by having all 3 others and talking to this lady in Hidden Kasuto. But if you come here without them all, she asks you if you have all 7 magic containers, which might lead you to believe that there are 7 to find. Not only is that not the case, but why would they word it like this and expect players to understand that the meters on our HUD are the containers when the containers expand the meters? Doesn't it make more sense to believe that the containers you found are the total number you have?
Remember the magic word.
Please? Oh. Spell. The spell. How descriptive, especially when paired with what you said to me. So what the spell does is that it turns most enemies into bots, making it easier to fight some of the more difficult ones. The thing is, using it to do that is entirely optional. However, the spell does have a required use that has nothing to do with how you would use it literally anywhere else in the game. Using it at the edge of Hidden Kasuto reveals a temple that harbors the magic key, which, unless you want to spend a bunch of magic on turning into a fairy each time, you need in order to complete the 3-Eye Rock Palace. And while you may be able to put 2 and 2 together that you can use the spell you just got, the only reason you would even think to do something here is by talking to the lady that gives you access to the last magic container after she lets you in her house, who tells you that there's a secret at the edge of town. But when faced with a tall wall, no one to tell me what the spell does, the manual stating that its effects aren't fully known but that it'll make the enemy tremble in fear, and seeing no enemies here, why would I not assume that the secret involves me using the fairy spell instead? Like, yeah, I'd quickly find out that that isn't the solution, but you're kind of relying on me talking to the lady after she gives me access to her house, which, fair enough, but I'm sure there were a few people that went in, got their last container, and bolted without so much as a thank you. They probably didn't reasonably intend on anyone maxing out their stats, but the only way to reliably do so without fighting a bunch of enemies that only give you a minuscule amount of experience is to visit the palaces once for the sake of obtaining their respective items to continue your quest, leave without placing the crystal, and then return later when the experience point requirements are so out of reach that even leveling up once takes ages. When you return a crystal to its respective statue, you're automatically given enough experience points to level up your next stat. And I'm sure this was done for the sake of ensuring that you get a buff right after completing a palace before moving on to the next area, but it's interesting that this doesn't automatically happen after defeating each palace's guardian. Now, I can't say for sure, but it's almost like they meant for you to do this. The point requirements become so ridiculous toward the end that there's no way this isn't what you're expected to do. The max level all your stats can be is level 8, and if all my stats are at level 7, I need to get 17,000 experience points to fully upgrade. Now, again, they likely didn't intend on you doing this. I know I didn't have all my stats maxed out when I beat this game for the first time, but there's no way that they set a limit to it and expected you to farm enemies that drop less than 200 points. After a certain point in the game, they just stop increasing the point drops. And it's also interesting that every 9,000 points after that, you get an extra life. How would you reasonably do that without taking advantage of this mechanic? I don't think it's an oversight, but I also can't prove it isn't. These stupid statues in Medoro Palace shoot balls at just the right intervals and angles to make it so you can't just run through them, but also make them annoying to block. The get the item and come back later thing also trivializes the Guardians, making them way easier to defeat than they would be otherwise. And I get a level up after that? Like, come on, they can't have meant for you to do this, but they had to have meant for this to be possible. Okay, so this is a first. I was getting ready to finish this script when I came across information that changed my mind on this. Kind of. You see, in the original Famicom Disk System version, each stat requires the same experience points to level up. 50 points to get to level 2, then 300 to get to level 3, and so on. The NES version that I'm playing has stat-specific requirements, meaning that none of the stats need the same number of points. To get attack to level 2, you need 200 points. Magic needs 150, and life needs the original 50 points. What ends up happening in the NES version is that in order to reach your attack stat's final level, you effectively need twice the number of points that you would have needed in the Famicom version. Getting 4,000 points 3 times to max out your stats is still a grueling endeavor, never mind getting 8,000, 5,000, and 4,000. And I was curious because if you need a combined 5,000 more points to max out your stats in the NES version, how many more experience points do you need total compared to the original Famicom version? Well, adding everything up, you need a combined total of 30,150 points to max out your stats in the Famicom version, which is still a lot. Like, if all we fought was regular enemies that drop the max number of experience points you can get, 200, you would need to fight that same enemy 151 times. And in the NES version, you need 41,200 experience points. That's 11,050 more points! That's 3,050 more points than you need to max out your attack stat in the NES version. What, did they think that maxing out your levels was too easy in the original, so they compensated by making it next to impossible to do overseas without the get the item and come back later technique? You would need to fight 206 of the enemies that give you the most experience in order to max everything out. 206! Which of these 3 enemies would you like to fight that many times? I don't want to fight any of them once, let alone 206 times. Oh. Maybe Ganon was a white supremacist. And these things are called wizards? You sure you don't want to put a grand in front of that one? Karok is quite possibly the easiest guardian in this game. You use your reflect spell, the only time you're required to do so, and just chill in the corner. Don't even have to do anything. You know, you'd think he'd just stop doing this to himself. Guma also falls under that same just attack him until he's off screen and he won't be able to hit you thing that Horsehead has. The only way you would know to use the flute to reveal the 3-Eye Rock Palace is someone in Hidden Kasuto telling you to call for help at the 3-Eye Rocks. I guess there's nothing else I can do other than use the flute here in lieu of a call for help button, but I guess if a hammer can cut down a tree, playing a flute can be used to call for help. Oh, okay, yeah, cool. No, I knew that. I mean, obviously, right? I hope you knew to save your magic so you could become a fairy here and cross the chasm, otherwise it's back to grinding magic jars from flying horse heads next to bottomless pits. I hope you got enough magic back after that and that you have the reflexes of an adequately sized hamster so you can select the spell to turn into a fairy right after falling down here. Actually, this part perfectly illustrates another grievance I have with this game. It's a minor one, but isn't it kind of stupid that you have to bring up the subscreen every time you want to use a spell? Like, you can't just have a spell selected, use it on one screen, and keep it selected to use it on the next one. No, even if it's selected, you have to bring up the submenu on every new screen before you can use a spell again. Barbai's a pretty annoying guardian to fight because he bobs up and down, making hitting him easy to miss, and what's worse is that he comes out of bottomless pits that are easy to fall in. Fortunately, I found that standing in this precise spot helps stay just out of reach of his flames, but chasing him down when he pokes his head back up can still be pretty spooky. The only thing worse than having to deal with the Geru throwing rocks at you is having to do that while being chased by these f***ing Moa.
Leave me alone!
So as I stated earlier, this game originally released on the Famicom Disk System, and something I didn't really talk about during the last game is that Disk System games came out in the form of proprietary floppy disks, which store information on both sides. Some games were usually small enough that you could fit them nicely on just one side, meaning you could potentially have 2 games on one disk. Others, like this game, stored their information in very specific ways, and while most of the game is contained on side B, the Great Palace is so monumental that they had to put it on side A alongside the title screen and registration menu. As a result, if you were to get a game over during the Great Palace, instead of asking you to swap sides and force you to make your way back here from North Castle each time, they simply just respawn you at the beginning of the palace, a feature that was preserved for the NES version despite being on a cartridge that didn't need swapping of any kind. My question is, why don't all of the palaces work like this? I understand why it was more convenient to have you respawn here from a technical standpoint, but even the last game just made you start a dungeon over if you die. It doesn't send you all the way back to the first screen. Oh yeah, obviously, I knew that was there. These bastards, the blue Fakas, are by far the worst enemies to fight in this game. Imagine having to fight a blue iron knuckle that can jump and will not stop doing so. And for the record, they actually give you less experience points than a blue iron knuckle does. Blue Fakas? More like motherfuckers! Fortunately, my wife actually saw me fighting this thing for the first time and pointed out a surefire way to deal with it, and they can't have meant for you to do this, right? The giant bubbles exclusive to the Great Palace function the same as regular bubbles, stealing magic from you upon contact, but you would think that being bigger, it would be more challenging and rewarding to defeat, but no, not really. It goes down just as, if not more easily, and you don't even get experience points for beating it. Ah, Jesus! What the f***, man? You can't just drop a new enemy right on top of me out of nowhere, even if it is easy to beat! So the guardian of this palace is called Thunderbird, and if you know its name, it's probably easy to figure out that you need to use the Thunder spell at the beginning of the fight so you can even start hitting him. But I don't know how you're supposed to know that when you first encounter this guy. Maybe you would think to do so because the Thunder spell is a powerful screen nuke and it's the most recent spell you've acquired, but it also costs so much magic to use that you may not have enough when you first fight him. Also, none of the Guardians have their name stated in the game or in the manual, so you kinda can't use his name as a hint. And this thing is f***ing annoying to fight. It constantly floats around the arena, dropping fireballs all over the place, forcing you to have to chase it around in order to hit it, making each time you jump at it a gamble to see whether or not you get hit by one of the fireballs. And you have to jump, because even though the dude does float down from time to time, making it even harder to know where to chase him, his hitbox will still be out of reach. You can use the jump spell to help with that, but then you'll be jumping way too high when he does come down. Why am I fighting a shadow version of myself? Did that little dude up there with the Triforce trick me, or is there something else going on? Actually, who is that little dude? I don't think that's ever explained anywhere. Even if you've never played this game, you've likely at least heard of the corner crouching exploit, which pretty much guarantees my victory, and after all the boost this game has put me through, I am not ashamed to win this way.
Slide to the right.
Hey, I'm getting revived back there. Oh, dude, you guys had programmers? They were so good at graming, they were pros at it? So this game has a second quest as well, but it's definitely more of a New Game Plus, where you play the exact same game, but retaining all the levels you earned in your first playthrough. You just have to collect the palace items again, and f*** that. I already suffered through this game once, and I'm not itching to do it again.
Link, the time has come when I must tell you the legend of Zelda handed down in Hyrule. It is said that long ago...
A long ago? You mean a long time ago, or just long ago? For those unfamiliar with the story of this game, the long and short of it is that after the events of the first game, on Link's 16th birthday, a mark in the form of the Triforce appears on the back of his hand, and Impa, the princess's nursemaid who sets Link off on his adventure in the first game, brings him to North Castle. Using the mark on Link's hand, Impa opens the door to a room where a girl is sleeping on an altar. She tells Link the literal legend of Zelda, a princess who was given specific information as to the whereabouts of the remaining Triforce of Courage by her father. Refusing to give up this information, a traitorous magician put her under a sleeping spell. How exactly the magician thought he would get this information from someone who's now unconscious, I have no idea. But the point is, after being put under this spell, the princess's brother, who had inherited the kingdom after their father's passing, placed her in this room to be undisturbed in the hopes that she may one day awaken, and ordered that every female child born into the royal family also be given the name Zelda for the sake of remembering what had happened to her. This slumber has also apparently prevented the princess from aging, meaning that the girl who's asleep on the altar isn't the Princess Zelda we saved from Ganon, but the original Princess Zelda, the one that the princess from the first game is named after, who just so happens to look exactly like the sleeping Princess Zelda. And while the backstory is a pretty cool idea, I don't get why they needed to make it so that the Zelda from this game is a different Zelda from the last game. You could have kept aspects from the original legend, but make it so that the Zelda Link already knows be the one put under a sleeping spell. If no one in the royal family is supposed to forget what happened to the original Zelda, it would stand to reason that the current Zelda would at least know something about why she was put to sleep, or maybe even where the last Triforce piece is. Because think about it, now that I've rescued and awakened the original Princess Zelda, does that now mean that there are currently 2 Princess Zeldas that look exactly the same? And who ends up ruling Hyrule in this situation? Does the current Princess Zelda keep her position and the original can just do whatever she wants? Or does the original heir to the throne take over because she's older? As well, Impa gives Link a chest containing something that has been passed down in her family for generations. The 6 crystals we need to return and a letter from the original Zelda's father that explains that the guardians we fight at the end of palaces were actually put there by him in order to protect the Great Palace guarding the Triforce of Courage. But when we game over against the Guardians, we're shown that Ganon still returns, despite the fact that they have nothing to do with him. Did Ganon's underlings come into the arena to steal Link's body and take his blood? Would they not have had to fight the Guardian too?
The magic spell cast upon Princess Zelda will sure to be broken if the Triforce is used.
Will sure to be broken? Or is sure to be broken? Link has been given 3 lives for the adventure that is about to begin. These lives are reduced by 1 whenever he loses a life? Know the strengths of the enemy well when you fight. Do not be misled by points alone. It's not like read and read. The past form of mislead is misled. Bro, what the f am I looking at here? That is a blurry ass picture of just color. Like, what am I looking at? In fights with the main guardians of the palace, the enemy's life power is displayed at the left of the screen. It may be good to keep an eye on this during the fight. What the hell? If you look really closely at the screenshot of Link fighting Horsehead, all of his, I'm pretty sure this is from the Famicom Disk System version, because I clearly see an 8 next to his attack level, and I'm pretty sure Magic Stat is at level 8, Life is at level 8, because the next point requirement is 4,000, meaning that whoever took this screenshot maxed out their levels before fighting Horsehead. You thought I wouldn't notice that, and I did. I almost missed that. Treasure Bag, a bonus which increases Link's experience points. Watch out, enemies sometimes pop out of them too. Really? What? I've played this game twice and that's never happened. Handy Glove, use this to break the blocks in the palaces by swinging the sword. Oh, that's what this does? I'm not gonna lie, I always forget that the Handy Glove is in this game, so I've never questioned what it does, nor did I think I needed anything special to break those blocks. If I recall correctly, you don't even come across any of these blocks until after you collect this anyway, so unlike a lot of the other items that have automatic effects, I don't think you would even notice anything different. Magical Key, a magic key that can open several of the locked doors. It can open all of the locked doors, can it? In the palaces anyway. I know it doesn't open doors in the towns, if that's what you're implying, but you could have specified that. Cross. With its power, you'll be able to see enemies which you normally can't see. So, is that the power of the cross itself, or am I channeling the power of Jesus? Because I thought I was already doing that with the boots. Hey everyone, Charai5 here. Thank you so much for watching my CINEMASINS pastiche of everything wrong with Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. This one is one that I think is particularly tough to talk about. Usually, unless it's a game that I hate, which is rare, when I'm making these videos, I tend to have a lot of affection for them because I play through them, I do a lot of research for them, I learn a lot about them. And Zelda 2, even though it's a game that I don't like, I see a lot of value in it. I see a lot of the things that it does right. It started, the action-adventure genre, which, evolved into one of my favorite genres, which is like the JRPG, sort of hack-and-slash action-adventure RPG. And while I think it does do a lot of things well, I think the things that it doesn't do as well, the more frustrating aspects of it, are what really hold me back from really enjoying the game and really liking it. That being said, I do love watching people play this game. I love watching this game be played, especially by people who are good at it. But even watching my own footage back that I recorded for this, I was like, oh man, this looks fun. I kind of want to play it again. And I had to play certain parts again to record footage for things that I was talking about. And then I remembered, like, oh, right, this is why I don't like this game too much. On screen, you are seeing the names of the wonderful patrons and channel members who decide to contribute monthly to this channel. If you want to see your name and profile picture among these wonderful people, you can do so by heading into the link in the description or hitting the join button underneath this video. But if you don't want to do that, if you can't do that, no worries, every little bit helps. You can like the video, comment, tell other people what you think about this game in the comments, subscribe, and the most important one is sharing it with people that you think might find this video funny or might find this video interesting, people who you think could, contribute to the discussion. All those little things help. So, I will see you guys next time, either with Sonic Cross Worlds or with A Link to the Past. I'm not entirely sure, but until next time, stay safe, stay awesome. This is Char5, signing off.